What you're about to hear will make you shudder. Imagine police officers weeping in horror at what they've seen. Imagine a family where members die one after another under mysterious circumstances. No, this isn't the plot of a mystical thriller. This is a real story that happened to an incredibly charming girl. Daisy Coleman, a young beauty, seemed to have everything one could dream of: a kind heart, a sharp mind, and numerous talents. However, behind the appearance of this charming girl hid a tormented soul that had to endure terrible events at an early age. Daisy was born in the small town of Albany, Missouri, on March 30th, 1997. Her father, Michael, worked as a doctor, and her mother, Melinda, was a veterinarian. Daisy was raised in the Coleman family along with her 3 biological brothers, being the second child. Tragedy struck the family in 2009 when Michael, Daisy, and one of her younger brothers were traveling to a neighboring town for a wrestling competition. During this trip, their car collided with an obstacle on the road and flew into a ditch. Sadly, as a result of this terrible accident, the head of the family died. After losing her father, the Coleman family moved to the larger city of Maryville, also in Missouri. Melinda single-handedly raised her 3 sons and daughter, and although it wasn't easy, she managed her responsibilities. At that time, no one in the Coleman family, who had already experienced a horrific loss, could even imagine the curse that awaited them in the future. Early in the morning of January 8, 2012, 14-year-old Daisy Coleman regained consciousness in the yard of her own house. Outside, there was a bone-chilling cold, with temperatures reaching 0. Daisy was lying on the snow, her hair frozen to the ground. The girl was wearing only a t-shirt and sweatpants. At that moment, the first thought that flashed through Daisy's mind was, "I must be dead." She couldn't get up or call for help. Her speech was slurred and confused. Daisy was crying. With great difficulty, the girl managed to crawl to the front door of the house and bang on it with all her might. The clock showed 5 and it was a real miracle that Daisy's mother, Melinda, who was sleeping in her room, heard a strange knocking at the door through her sleep. At first, she thought it was their dogs that had gotten cold outside and were trying to get into the house. The woman threw on a robe and headed for the front door to let the animals into the warm home. When Melinda opened the door, she saw her daughter Daisy on the threshold. The girl was lying on the cold steps, almost unconscious. She reeked heavily of alcohol, unable to speak, only crying. The mother instantly screamed, calling for her sons to help. The boys woke up, quickly ran downstairs, and carried the frozen Daisy into the house. The whole family was terrified. At first, they tried to warm the girl with blankets, but the mother, upon closely examining her daughter, realized that her legs were most likely severely frostbitten. So the mother filled the bathtub with water and asked her sons to take Daisy to the bathroom, leave her there, and go out. The girl was still unconscious. The mother herself began to undress her daughter and saw huge bruises and red marks on her legs. It was only at this moment that the woman realized something terrible had happened to her beloved Daisy. The mother gently immersed Daisy in a bathtub with cool water. As a veterinarian, she knew well how to provide first aid for frostbite. The woman gradually increased the water temperature in the bathtub, thus slowly warming her daughter's body. Fortunately, she managed to help Daisy. Soon the girl warmed up, but her speech remained unclear and confused. It was difficult for Daisy to speak, so the alarmed Melinda called 911 and summoned the police. When the police officers arrived at the scene, they immediately began examining Daisy. However, the girl was still under the influence of alcohol, and her mind was clouded, so she couldn't clearly recount the events of the previous night. Under these circumstances, the police had to turn to Daisy's friend, Paige, who was also at the Coleman family's house that night and slept in the same room as Daisy. Paige shared her version of the events with the officers. As her friend recounted, on Saturday, January 7, 2012, Daisy invited her best friend Paige to her house for a sleepover. In the evening, the girls decided to watch a few horror movies and, for a greater effect, drank strong alcoholic beverages that they had secretly stolen from the Coleman family's home bar. Closer to midnight, Daisy began exchanging messages with her older brother's friend, 17-year-old Matthew Barnett, who was the star of the school football team. Upon learning that Daisy was spending the night with a friend, Matthew sent the girls a message proposing they have fun at his place. Daisy and Paige enthusiastically agreed to this adventure and arranged to meet with Matthew and his friends. Around 1 o'clock in the morning on January 8th, the girlfriends snuck out of Daisy's house through her bedroom window and ran around the corner, where Matthew and 4 of his friends were already waiting for them. The boys escorted the girls to Matthew's house, helped them get through the window into the basement, and asked them to be quiet so as not to wake up Barnett's parents, who were sleeping upstairs. According to Paige, as soon as she and Daisy found themselves in the basement, Matthew immediately began treating Daisy to alcohol. Paige sat nearby and watched as her friend drank one glass after another, almost without stopping. At some point, one of the boys, named Nicholas, approached Paige, took her hand, and led her to a neighboring empty room in the basement. There, at the young man's initiative, they had sexual intercourse. Meanwhile, Matthew and Daisy went to another room where there was a large bed. Several times, when the door opened, Paige was able to see what was happening in that room with Daisy. The girl was lying on the bed, barely conscious, unable to speak or move. Matthew took advantage of her helpless state and engaged in sexual intercourse with Daisy. His friend Jordan Zetch filmed everything that was happening on his smartphone camera. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the boys decided it was time to go home. They put the girls in the car and drove them to the Coleman family's house. Paige got out of the car first. Matthew told her that Daisy should sit outside in the fresh air to sober up. The boys assured that they would stay with Daisy and take care of her safety outside. They advised Paige to go home and go to bed. The friend believed their words and agreed to go alone. Paige got to the house, climbed through the window into Daisy's bedroom, fell on the bed, and instantly fell asleep. At this time, the boys pulled Daisy out of the car, set her on her feet, and supported her so she wouldn't fall. The girl got sick, so they took off her shoes, took her purse and cell phone, and held her hair while she vomited. Then they gently laid Daisy on the cold ground near the house. Fearing that they might be noticed and not wanting to take risks, the young men quickly got into the car and drove away. Daisy lay outside for about 3 hours in the bitter cold at 0 temperature. She was wearing only a t-shirt and sweatpants, without socks or shoes. Her hair was wet and frozen. Arriving at the scene on a call, the police officers thoroughly examined the Coleman family's house and the surrounding area. In Daisy's room, they came across 5 empty plastic bottles of alcoholic beverages. In the yard, they found Daisy's bag, her cell phone, shoes, and traces of vomit. That same morning, the victim was taken to the hospital for a medical examination. During the examination, numerous bruises on her legs and tears in the groin area were recorded on Daisy's body. The girl had several tests taken, one of which showed that the alcohol level in her blood was almost twice the maximum allowable limit. After a few hours in the hospital, Daisy finally regained consciousness. She reported that she did not remember any details of the previous night. The girl could not reproduce the details of what happened and admitted that she had drunk too much alcohol. However, Daisy did not deny the fact that she had taken alcoholic beverages from the home bar without her mother's permission and secretly ran away at night to the company of boys. Around 11 a.m. on January 8th, a few hours after the incident, law enforcement officers located Matthew Barnett, Jordan Zetch, and Nicholas Graumaudes. They were charged and all 3 were taken to the police station for interrogation. During questioning, Matthew Barnett did not deny having intimate relations with Daisy Coleman that night. However, he insisted that everything happened by mutual consent. The boy said that when he met Daisy and her friend Paige, the girls were already intoxicated. At first, Matthew denied treating Daisy to alcohol, but the more he spoke, the more entangled he became in his own testimony. Eventually, he did confess to treating Daisy to a few shots of strong drinks to melt her icy heart. Matthew reported that during intercourse, he used a condom, which he threw away on the way back to Daisy's house. Another person involved in the case, Jordan Zetch, initially refused to testify but later admitted to using his friend Nicholas' smartphone to record a video of Matthew kissing Daisy. The video lasted about 10 seconds. Jordan managed to show this video to his friends, but then, getting scared, deleted it. Nicholas, who had sexual intercourse with Daisy's friend Paige, was the only one who immediately fully admitted his guilt. He was sent to a juvenile detention center. Matthew's friend, who drove the boys and girls in his car to Daisy's house, said that throughout the ride, Daisy wouldn't stop crying, and Matthew expressed fears that the girl's brother Charlie would kill him if he found out what happened. At the same time, it became known that a few days before the terrible incident, Matthew had already visited the Coleman's home. That time, he had a peaceful dinner with the family at the same table in a friendly atmosphere. At 1 p.m. on January 8th, a search was conducted in the basement of Matthew Barnett's house. Police officers seized bed linen, several empty bottles, men's underwear, and plastic cups. During repeated interrogations, the sheriff's assistant, while talking to Matthew, was moved by the young man's story. At one point, the officer even suggested that girls often resort to such actions to attract attention, and it is quite possible that this case is one of those. The sheriff's assistant praised Matthew for taking care of the girl and driving her home. However, for some reason, the fact that the boy left Daisy alone to freeze on the street did not attract the officer's proper attention. Several days passed, and Daisy Coleman's health condition completely normalized. Her life was no longer in danger. However, the girl still could not recall any new details of that terrible night. 2 months later, in March 2012, all charges against Matthew Barnett and Jordan Zech were completely dropped. The district attorney concluded that the intimate relationship between the young people occurred by mutual consent. The video recording that Jordan made that night could not be restored after deletion, although several of Jordan's classmates claimed they saw footage of Matthew kissing Daisy. During the analysis of the couple's smartphones, the investigation found out that Matthew and Daisy maintained telephone communication about once a month. In text messages, Daisy hinted to Matthew that she was ready to have sexual intercourse with him in exchange for a bottle of strong alcohol. In addition, correspondence was found dating back to before January 8th, in which Daisy and Matthew exchanged explicit messages of a sexual nature. After Matthew's release from custody, it became known that he was the grandson of an influential political figure, Rex Barnett, who had previously been a member of the state legislative assembly. Rex Barnett was a member of the Committee on Criminal Law and Public Safety. He had close ties with many prosecutors and police officers throughout the state of Missouri. Matthew and Jordan were released, and the boys returned to their normal lives. At the same time, Daisy Coleman hoped that the hype surrounding her nightly adventure would finally subside. The girl continued her education, but instead of support from her peers, she faced open hostility and ridicule. Most of her acquaintances sided with Matthew, and Daisy began to be called a liar and a slut. She instantly turned into an outcast, withdrew into herself, and tried to spend as much time as possible at home alone. Daisy, who had previously led an active social and public life, was involved in sports and dancing, now simply disappeared from sight. Moreover, the girl was forced to leave the school cheerleading squad. Daisy's mother, Melinda, began receiving anonymous threats daily, both at home and at work. Soon, the woman was asked to quit her job at the veterinary clinic, where she had worked for many years. After that, the Coleman family realized that they could no longer stay in the town of Maryville and decided to move to another place. In the spring of 2013, their empty house in Maryville, put up for sale, burned to the ground. The police never managed to establish the cause of the fire. There were rumors that Matthew Barnett's father was involved. Sometime later, under extremely mysterious circumstances, the house of Daisy's friend named Paige also burned down. By that time, the girls had already stopped communicating. By the way, Paige also became an outcast at school. It is known that the girl suffered from nightmares for a long time. As time passed, Daisy's story attracted the attention of the media. The girl began receiving active support from people across the country, especially those who had experienced similar traumatic experiences. Thanks to this, Daisy managed to reopen the case against her main offender, Matthew Barnett. The case went to trial, but the boy was found guilty only of leaving Daisy alone in the cold in the middle of the night. Matthew Barnett was sentenced to 2 years of probation and ordered to pay the Coleman family $1,800 in compensation. The other defendants in the case avoided any charges. Daisy Coleman continued to live her life, but regularly encountered not only words of support, but also threats from anonymous users on the internet. She understood how unfairly people behaved. Daisy took every negative message addressed to her very painfully. In 2016, when 19-year-old Daisy was studying in college, a documentary film titled Audrey and Daisy was released on the Netflix streaming service. The film told the story of violence, bullying, harassment on social networks, and the detrimental consequences this can lead to in the future. Daisy became one of the main characters of the film and shared her story. However, the fate of the second heroine, Audrey Pott from California, turned out to be even more tragic. Almost the same thing happened to Audrey as to Daisy Coleman in 2012. But unlike Daisy, Audrey was unable to cope morally with what happened. The girl's photos quickly spread across the network. Both Audrey's friends and enemies saw them. The last post she left on her social media page contained the following words: "My life is ruined. The whole school knows. I will never get rid of this reputation. Everyone knows how bad I am. I want it all to end." 9 days later, Audrey took her own life. She could not withstand the humiliation that fell upon her from all sides. Audrey's parents were able to initiate a criminal case only 6 months after their daughter's death. The perpetrators, 3 boys, were sentenced to terms ranging from 30 to 45 days. Later, their families paid Audrey's parents about $1 million in moral compensation. Let's return to Daisy Coleman. In 2018, seeking to start life with a clean slate, the girl moved to the state of Colorado, where she got a job at a tattoo parlor. At the same time, she worked on creating a second film project, which focused on the process of her own recovery. However, in June 2018, Daisy faced another shock. Her mother Melinda and brother Tristan got into a car accident while driving to Daisy from their hometown. As a result of the accident, 19-year-old Tristan died. The circumstances of this tragedy remain unknown to this day. After losing her brother, Daisy published a post on social media in which she admitted that every day it became more and more difficult for her to keep her inner demons under control, to put on a smile, and to pretend that everything was fine. After Tristan's death, Daisy co-founded a charitable organization that supported victims of violence. She continued to share her personal tragedy and provide support to other people who found themselves in similar situations. In her publications, Daisy repeatedly talked about how sometimes it was difficult for her to cope with the thoughts swirling in her head. She struggled with emotional pain, panic attacks, and constant terrible memories. In the summer of 2020, 23-year-old Daisy Coleman began sharing disturbing details with her friends. She was being stalked by an unknown man who constantly sent her threats. The girl went to the police and filed a statement that a stranger had been following her since December 2019. Daisy desperately pleaded for help, but her pleas went unanswered. On Tuesday, August 4, 2020, she published a tweet in which she admitted that she was afraid to leave the house. Daisy wrote that she couldn't even walk her dog or go to work because of the overwhelming fear. She also reported that she had lost her appetite and couldn't sleep. A few hours later, a new post from Daisy appeared on Facebook. She said that some man had approached her house and knocked on the door. The girl confessed that she was very scared. She suggested that this man might have previously stolen her keys, and now it would not be difficult for him to get into her home. In addition, Daisy reported that the unknown man had stolen her photos and registered on one of the sites, where he offered intimate services for money on her behalf. Melinda, Daisy's mother, upon stumbling upon her daughter's message on social media, immediately called the Colorado police asking them to check on the girl. At 4 p.m., officers arrived at Daisy's home. She let them into the house, and the police spent about an hour with her. The girl again told them about being stalked by an unknown man. The officers did not notice anything suspicious in Daisy's behavior. But shortly after the law enforcement officers left, 23-year-old Daisy Coleman contacted her boyfriend via video call. During the conversation, she suddenly took out a gun, pointed it at herself, and pulled the trigger. Her boyfriend did not immediately realize what had happened. The connection was cut off. Daisy stopped answering calls. Frightened, the young man dialed 911. When the police officers arrived at Daisy Coleman's house again at 8 p.m., they found the girl already dead. One of the police officers couldn't hold back and burst into tears at the sight. The girl had a fatal gunshot wound. She was lying in a pool of blood. Melinda, Daisy's mother, reported her daughter's death in a post on her social media page. She wrote, "Daisy was my best friend and a wonderful daughter. How I wish I could take her pain away. She never recovered from what those boys did to her back in school. It's just not fair. My girl is gone from us." The woman said that she had fought for Daisy and her mental health for many years. She believed that she had done everything possible for her beloved daughter. The mother also confirmed that in recent months, Daisy was indeed being stalked, and just recently, the girl found out that she would never be able to have children. After Daisy's death, the tattoo parlor where she worked was robbed. The perpetrator stole an album with Daisy's exclusive sketches and her tattoo machine. 4 months passed. In December 2020, 58-year-old Melinda Coleman published another heartfelt post on social media dedicated to her beloved daughter. And soon after, the woman took a gun in her hands and did the same as Daisy. Only 2 sons remained in the Coleman family, the older Charlie and the younger Logan. The charitable organization founded by Daisy organized a fundraiser to support the boys. It became known that Matthew Barnett's life and career were going well. After the death of Daisy and her mother Melinda, he expressed words of sympathy about the tragedy that befell the Coleman family. "I hope that Daisy's story will be the impetus for change in our society. We must create a world in which no child will suffer from violence, where every voice will be heard, and every victim will receive support and justice. Thank you for being with me and listening to this difficult story. I love each and every one of you. May the memory of Daisy Coleman forever remain in our hearts as a reminder that love, compassion, and support are what make us human. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.